Jump on the beat.
Turn the music up for me, Chris.
She's gonna get my night runs into morning all the time.
Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Brody Rumble. I'm Adam Bernstein. Unfortunately, co-host Mo will not be with us today, but he is busy as he's preparing for the football season, which is approaching. But that's okay. We still have special guests. We have Ian Steele today. Ian is from Marshfield, Mass. He graduated from Emerson College in Boston. He worked with EIV News, the Emerson Channel, and WEBN. Moved to Corpus Christi after college, where you worked as a sports reporter and an anchor, and you were there for 3 years.
I was there, for 3 years. You did your homework, man. I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I researched.
Yeah, 3 years in Corpus.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then you returned back to New England. Now you're with ABC6. But how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, man. How are you? Things are dealing with snow, but we're hanging in there. What about yourself?
Sure. So I gotta ask, you being a New England guy, what are your thoughts on Super Bowl? We're recording this on Tuesday after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, we can't be surprised at this point anymore, can we? It's like once the Bucks honestly beat Washington, I was like, he's gonna go all the way and get it done. So, and I know it was weird. Like everyone's like, why Washington? They weren't the best team. Obviously, they won a division, but a losing record and all that. But it's just like once he got over that first playoff hurdle with that team, with Tampa Bay, the losingest franchise in the history of the NFL, you could just kind of smell it. Plus, you look down the road, and there's the Saints, who are always, highly touted, and they have good regular seasons, but they can never really get it done in the postseason. And the Packers are pretty much the same way. So once I saw those guys down the road for Tom, I kind of figured he was going. And then once he got there, you hear about, the injuries for Kansas City, their offensive line, Mahomes banged up. So once he got there, I figured, of course, he was going to win it. And it definitely makes things very interesting in these parts, just, watching Brady, take that next step with a different team. And you wonder what's going to happen here in New England as kind of a counterpunch. Even though they may not look at it that way, it's still in the back of their mind. You saw the players tweeting about how, much success Brady's having and congratulating him on his Super Bowl. Edelman, Gilmore, McCourty, all those guys happy for him. So they see it. And now we'll see what the next move is in Foxborough.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that, he can just go over to an entirely new conference, new coach and everything. And he brought all these people with him. Antonio Brown, Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette, pretty much everyone who scored for them on Sunday was new to the team, wasn't with the Buccaneers last season. So I think it's kind of crazy the kind of impact that Tom Brady has, and then all the players that followed along with him. So,
yeah, he instilled his culture, really. He changed the culture of that entire organization. And, I remember back on Super Bowl 51 against the Atlanta Falcons, the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. There's that story, Chris Long is in there at halftime, and he was only with the Patriots for 1 year. He started with the Rams, went on to Philly, but he was only with the Patriots for 1 year. He's in the Super Bowl his first year, but they're getting crushed at halftime. And he's like, man, this sucks. Like, I came to New England to try and win a Super Bowl, and we're getting killed. Like, this game's over. And then someone looks over to him. He goes, it's not over because we have Tom Brady.
right.
Oh, don't give up now, because he's not giving up, and we're going to come back and win this thing. And that name he mentioned was Tom Brady. That kind of belief carried over to Tampa Bay. And, once he got his hands on the offense, and once, the guys started to buy in and understand that if you follow this guy, things are going to go well for you. Then, and I think it goes from the players all the way to the coaches, like that offense changed pretty much at the bye week. And so, when Tom Brady walks into the room, you have no choice but to really follow him, because he's the greatest to ever do it. And that presence alone can change a culture. And we saw that with the Bucks. You know, like I said, losing his franchise in history, struggled a lot before he got there, and now they're at the top of the mountain. And like you mentioned, he brought his own guys in.
Yeah.
And, you know, Rob Gronkowski. The only way Gronk was coming out of retirement was to play with Tom in a good situation. And say what you want about Antonio Brown. He's had a lot of issues over the years, and I didn't think he would really ever step foot on an NFL field again after he left New England. I was there for those couple weeks that he was there, and it was a firestorm. But, you know, Brady saw the talent in him, and everything else kind of, I guess, went to the wayside. And look at him now. You know, Antonio Brown's gonna get a ring because of Tom Brady. So the best and the worst can get it done with him.
For sure. But to go into more about you, a question that we always like to lead off for all the guests that we have come on the show is, what is your why? What motivates you every day?
That's
what you do.
Wow. All right. Let's get philosophical here. My why. So my why has always been about really hard work. You know, but the reason I put in all the hard work is just because of the way I was kind of brought up. You know, I think of, you know, my dad who was a New England sports fan through and through. We played semi-pro football. His picture's right over there, actually, of him on the field. He played into his 30s. He loved the game. Brought me up to love the game. My first word was touchdown, and I said it watching a Patriots game with him. So, like, from a young age, you know, you just fall in love with it. And as you know, move through life and you kind of realize, like, oh, this is something that I could possibly, you know, base my life around, you know what I mean, in terms of sports and my love for it. And I just pursued it there. So my why is, you know, my family. They're always the first thing on my mind with everything that I do. And so, yeah, they motivate me to continue to work hard. They taught me, you know, I think a solid work ethic that I try to lean on big days and busy days and crazy days where you're exhausted, and even in the mundane times like we had a couple months ago during COVID when there was not much going on. Sometimes you have to motivate yourself, and like you said, think about why you do the things you do and just focus on that. So yeah, my why is definitely my family, I'd say.
Okay, great. Yeah, no. For me personally, I always wanted to work within sports. I knew I wasn't good enough to be an athlete or built enough
You
to
and
be
me both, my friend.
You know, I was kind of just inspired by the radio talk shows and the podcasts. Like, I kind of realized that the opportunities were there, especially I'm from Long Island originally, but coming to URI and seeing what the Harrington School built up here and the opportunities, and that kind of inspired me. Did you have that same motive in college to get into sports media, or were you not always sure whether or not you wanted to work within the industry?
I wasn't always sure, but there were like hints along the way, I guess. Like, my mom tells a story about how I used to run around with a little microphone and tape recorder and like interview people about like Sesame Street, and like, you know, when I was just a little kid. And then, you know, you watch the thing I look forward to the most every week was like, you know, watching football games on Sundays with my dad. And once I got to high school, it kind of, you know, weeded its way out. I was thinking either psychology or media, and one, media requires less school and less degrees, and I wasn't the best student in the world. Sorry, URI. But at the same time, you know, I had at Marshfield High School where I went, there was a telecommunications class, which was basically like you put together a newscast for the morning announcements for around the school. And on the show, you know, they did the announcements and the news, and our weather segment was like just SNL sketches, kind of funny stuff with wacky weather people, weathermen, weather women meteorologists. They weren't meteorologists. They were just kids. And then the sports segment where, they would show highlight clips and give you the schedule for the rest of the day and hype videos and previews and interviews and stuff like that. So I was doing that, and it was quickly my favorite class. And my telecom teacher, his name's Brian Shakocious, we call him Shaq. And one thing I remember, he was like, if it's your favorite class, that should probably tell you something. If you enjoy doing it, why not do it for the rest of your life? And my parents say that too. You never work a day in your life if you're doing something you love. And so I loved going to that class every morning. It was always, it was always the first class of the day. It was an early class because you had to do the morning announcements. And I never had a problem, waking up early to make sure I got there on time, or, driving through the snow to get there on time or anything like that. So that kind of showed me something. And then the sports realm of it, I kind of found through college. I was like doing the sports in high school, but then I was just trying to do everything, and I did that a little bit in college. And then, but once I got to college, I was focused on, zeroing in on sports. And I was in Boston at Emerson, where you're in the middle of the city. Fenway Park's like a 20-minute walk, and the TD Garden's right there. So a lot of parades went through campus, and through that you just kind of stay focused on that, and that's what I did.
So at Emerson, were you covering athletics or teams within the school, or were you covering Boston sports like Red Sox, Celtics, that kind of thing?
A little bit of both. So through a couple different organizations. You mentioned EIV, and with EIV we did a weekly newscast, and so there you're covering, more of the Boston teams and the national sports and all of that stuff. And then we also, there was the Emerson Channel, which is a different organization. I'm not sure if you have like multiple, I know you guys have like the cigar, and then you have like the newscast and stuff that you do. So there's a bunch of different organizations that you can do. So there's one called the Emerson Channel, which through them, we broadcasted the games, like the Emerson College games. We built it basically from scratch, and we built up a broadcast. We turned the gym into like a control room, basically. So we could broadcast, while I was there, the volleyball games that were in our gym and the basketball games that were in the gym. And so we did that a little bit. We had, play-by-play and color analysts and sideline reporters, and we put together the technical crew in the control room, cutting between the cameras, people to run the cameras. So we did that as well. And then through WEBN, which was another organization, I spent, honestly, I kid you not, in college, I spent more time doing the extracurricular organizations and activities probably than I did my actual classes. So once again, the student side of it is one thing, but I guess it worked out in the end. So it was a little bit of both. So through WEBN, we would cover the big events. We went to spring training. I was lucky enough to go twice while I was in college, and we stuck out like sore thumbs because we were so young. And there's Tim Kirchin, and there's Carl Ravitch, and there's Joel Sherman, and there's me, and I wore a tie, and it was 80 degrees in the summer, and I'm wearing or in the spring, and I'm wearing slacks and a tie and a dress shirt, sticking out like sore thumbs with our little handy cams. But yeah, so I was able to go to spring training twice. We sent a crew to the Super Bowl, and that was Patriots Giants, the second one. So that was very interesting to cover from a New England-based station. So a crew that was in Indy, I believe, and so we sent a crew there. So yeah, it was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of everything, but in terms of the opportunities that we had, there were so many of them at that school, just like there are at URI for you guys to get into the Ryan Center and to cover, those teams there. And you're also, a quick drive from Foxborough or a quick drive to Providence, or, if March Madness was going to come to Providence, I'm sure you guys would be there and all that, like it was supposed to, and like it will be in a couple of years. But the opportunities were just all over the place on so many different levels to get your hands dirty and to make the mistakes that everyone has to make. So that's what we were doing. Yeah. So through a bunch of different organizations, we covered everything from Emerson was D3, so we played in the GNAC, and there was another conference that we used to be in, but the GNAC was the big one. And my partner in crime at ABC6, Nick Coit, will be quick to tell you that he was on the Emerson baseball team. He's the catcher, so Lion pride in the ABC6 newsroom. We both went to the same college. So we were covering everything from, D3 volleyball and basketball all the way to the Super Bowl and the World Series in college, which was awesome. Unforgettable experiences with friends that I'll have forever. And that's another big thing we take away from it.
I think that's great. I mean, I feel like, especially for me growing up, I went to a lot of sports games. I mean, the Yankees, Knicks, not so much Giant games, stuff like that. Islanders, I was on Long Island. So I was able to kind of go to those games as a fan. I still go to the Rhode Island games and the Ryan Center. But I feel like as of recently, now that I'm involved in these organizations, and maybe you felt the same way in college, it's like you look at it from a different perspective, like the media perspective. You just appreciate, like, it's so much more. I feel like when I would go as a little kid with my dad, it was fun and I appreciated it. But now it's like, wow, I'm in the Ryan Center, there's live basketball in front of me, especially before the game that I spoke to you after the game last week. Before that, I hadn't been to a live sports game since like March of last year. Like, it's crazy. So I feel like I appreciate live sports, and just especially from the media standpoint, even more so now that I'm in college and I'm kind of working while I'm watching the games. So I don't know if you had that same feeling in college, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, so what was it? In 2011, the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, and that was before I transferred into Emerson. But the parade goes right past the campus and then goes up toward Boston City Hall, Boylston and Tremont Street. So before I transferred to Emerson, the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, and I went to the parade with my buddies. And it was a blast. It was awesome. It was a hot summer day, I remember. Then 2 years later, the Red Sox win the World Series. That's 2013. And I'm not out there with my buddies having a great time. I'm organizing the camera crews, field crews, to go out and cover it for our newscast special for WEBN that we were doing. So, to your example, going and being a part of the sports world as a young fan, and then as you go through college and as you develop your skills into, working media, it's still in you a little bit. It's still in me a little bit. You don't do it without having, the joy of enjoying it every day. If you don't enjoy it every day, you'll get burned out, because it's not laborious, but it's hard work and it's busy work and it's long hours and all that stuff. But the joy is still in there with you. And so, yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. You look at it from a different perspective. You think of, instead of being a part of the crowd, you're observing the crowd a little bit more, and you're seeing how, one thing affects the other, all that stuff. It definitely takes a little bit of a swing as you go through it. And it's good that you noticed that, because, there were friends of mine who were doing the games with me, and, they couldn't get the fan out of them, and they're just yelling and screaming into the microphone. And it's like, yes, enthusiasm is great in one thing, but let's remember why we're here, and it's to learn and to polish our skills instead of, screaming at the top of our lungs for no reason. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
So that's a part of it that you have to weed out, and it's good that you're doing that. It was awesome to see you after the Rhody game doing it was radio, right?
Yeah, the student run radio.
RIU?
WRIU, yeah.
So you know what? I don't know if I should say, they get a better reception driving around like Rhode Island as I'm driving. Like WRIU, it comes in clearer to my car as I'm driving from Providence into Kingston. So a lot of the times I listen to that on my way in, or if I have to leave early on my way out to like keep up with the game more so than I do the other FM dial. So you guys do a really good job with it. I remember listening a couple of times. I listened when Stone and Cardi were doing it. And then lately I've been able to stay the whole game, which is good. Coronavirus has kind of slashed all of the things that we have to go to now. So we can kind of sit and stick in one spot. But sometimes on those like Friday night Ryan Center games, I'm in and out after 4 minutes just to get a couple buckets to put on the news. But when I would leave early, I would listen to WRIU on the way home, and you guys do a really good job.
Thank you. So transitioning from Emerson to Corpus Christi, I guess you could say this is your first real job in the industry, in the field. What was that like? I mean, it's got to be a big move going from Massachusetts all the way to Texas, and also having to kind of change your lifestyle at the same time.
Yeah. So I just think of this story. It took me a couple months to find my first job down in Corpus Christi, but I was sending my resume and my reel out to a bunch of people, a bunch of stations all over the country. Didn't care where I was going to go. Just wanted a chance to get my foot in the door. I was confident. I stuck with it. But every now and then when you don't get a call back, it's like, well, is this going to work out for me? It finally does, thankfully. It was maybe October of 2014. So I graduated in May, and then a couple months go by and I, get the call to go to Corpus Christi, Texas. And I go to the local bar here in Marshfield and with my two best friends, and I'm working up the nerve to tell them that I'm moving halfway across the country. And I go and I sit down with them. And then all of a sudden my dad walks over. I can't say my first word. My dad walks over and he goes, "Hey guys, you hear about this guy? He's going to Texas." And I was like, "Dad, I didn't tell him yet." And they're like, "What? You go to Texas?" So that's how my best friends found out that I was moving to Texas. He can never keep a secret. So, but yeah, and me working up the nerves to tell them was kind of the reasoning behind, like, it's a big move. You're moving halfway across the country away from, your friends, your family, your hometown, your college town, because I was in Boston. But I was taught at Emerson by our wonderful professor who's still doing the thing, Marcia Delagostina. She said, you have to be willing to move anywhere and to follow the instructions of the newsroom that you get into. And that's what I did, That's why I wouldn't have sent my resume and my reel out to probably 100 different stations all across the country if I wasn't willing to do it. And that's something that worked out for me. You have to keep an open mind. If you want to get your foot in the door and start doing this, it's a great job. It's an awesome job. And I had a great time down there and I learned a lot. But in order to do that, you have to sacrifice. That's how I went about it. You have to sacrifice comfort and, it's just kind of a throw you out there, throw you in the water and see if you can sink or swim. And that's what I did. It wasn't my first time having an apartment. It wasn't my first time living on my own, but it was far away and it was, different culture, a town that I never visited before I signed my contract. And so I just, I was off. So yeah, it was an adjustment, but at the same time, my advice is always with everyone going through like a job search, their first job search out of college, things like that, keep an open mind. You will have, options, but they might be limited. You know what I mean? Because everyone is new at one point. It's very, 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 very rare to get a job in a top market right out of college, and so keeping that in mind, as you go through the search, just keeping an open mind and understanding that, you're going to probably go somewhere you've never been before, maybe never even heard of, because that certainly was the case for me.
That's great. It's definitely something that I'm personally taking into consideration. I don't know exactly what path I want to go to in sports media, but I've definitely, as of recently, especially thought about potentially taking on broadcasts and TV anchoring, sports anchoring specifically. So, I look at a lot of the students through the Harrington School who have graduated recently that have gone down that similar path, and a lot of them end up in places I've never heard of, or probably they never heard of either before they signed their contracts. So definitely something that I'm, I still have 2 years left, but keeping in the back of my mind if I do want to go down that path. But yeah, no, I mean, I can't imagine going to Texas and again, changing your lifestyle altogether. It's like, it's probably crazy. What kinds of, what teams were you covering when you were there?
So in Corpus Christi, we had the AA affiliate of the Houston Astros, which is the Corpus Christi Hooks, a great minor league team, great ballpark. The town loves the team. Everyone who goes through there, like all the Astro guys who won the World Series a couple of years ago, they always say like that was their favorite minor league stop just because people were so invested. The ballpark was beautiful. Corpus Christi is on the Gulf Coast. So there's like the Gulf of Mexico, and Corpus Christi is like right around it. It's that little tail that Texas has. And then Mexico is right down south there. So the Gulf of Mexico, all the beaches from Mexico, right around there. So it's super hot, super humid. It doesn't get cold like it is right now. Like the coldest it probably got was like 40, and it snowed for the first time there in like 20 years, like a month after I left. So I never saw snow down there at all. So the teams I was covering down there, the Corpus Christi Hooks, the AA team, there was a mid-major college there in Division I, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, the Islanders. They play in the Southland Conference, which Stephen F. Austin is a part of, Sam Houston State's a part of. So that was the Division I program that I covered. Then there was a Division II football program and a Division II school, but the biggest college football team was Division II down there. They were Texas A&M Kingsville, formerly known as Texas A&I, and John Randall, the defensive lineman for the Vikings, a Hall of Famer, he went there back in the day. And so they were a Division II powerhouse back in the day, kind of fallen on hard times lately. They've gone through coaches a couple times, but so that was the biggest college football that was down there, was Division II in our local market. And of course we still showed the highlights from, the Texas Longhorns, Texas A&M Aggies, Baylor, TCU, all that. And then, but the biggest thing down there, honestly, was the high school teams and the high school coverage we did. That drew the most traction, got the most eyeballs. They were so invested. I mean, you think of Texas, you think of Friday Night Lights and, Friday Night Football and all that stuff. And it's true. Like there's so much local pride in those teams down there. And I saw it firsthand. Like my first day on the job, I was shadowing. I was learning how to use our cameras. My first day on the job was a Friday night football night. We did a half-hour show every Friday night with local high school teams. And some of these towns and these high schools, tiny little towns, they fill out these stadiums. And these stadiums are huge. Everyone from the town stops on Friday nights. So, but bigger than the football down there was actually the high school baseball. The high school baseball down there was unbelievable because, like I said, it's so warm down there year round that these guys go out and play all the time. And the softball players, they're out playing all the time. They have indoor facilities, but they don't need to use them. So they can just go out on the field, play catch, take BP, play a game. Like constantly year round playing baseball. So a lot of the talent goes on to like the pros from that area. They go pro in baseball. They go pro in softball. And so that was the biggest thing. Like whenever there was a big game, they put it in the minor league stadium where the Astros team plays, the AA team. And that place would fill out for high school baseball games. They would fill a minor league stadium. Like imagine McCoy, like I know they put the state championship baseball games at McCoy Stadium for Rhode Island. But like it was packed to the brim, people sitting on the berms, chasing foul balls. Like it was unbelievable for high school baseball, which just changed my perspective on how, you know, that's how you learn your chops. That's how you learn how to cover things, is you start in the grassroots. But that was like, you know, I went to some Astros games. I went to, you know, a couple of big pro things down there. But the biggest things, the things that got the most hype were the local high school championship games, the football games, the baseball games, and specifically the baseball down there. It's like a part of the culture. Like New England football up here is probably part of the culture. In New York, it's probably like, you know, Yankees baseball, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Down there, it's like high school baseball through and through. It's like the biggest thing ever.
That's great. So transitioning from, I guess, you know, coming from Texas now, almost like a weather switch, but going from hot to cold and coming back to New England, now you're at ABC 6. What was the transition like, and how has it been since you've got there?
The transition was super smooth. You know, it's like coming home again. It's like riding a bike. It's like, you know, you come back and you're right in it. And part of that, probably the biggest part of that, is because of the people I work with at Channel 6. Nick Coit, like I mentioned, we went to the same college. We knew each other kind of secondhand, 6 degrees of separation at Emerson. We always go back and forth. Like, were we there in the same semester? No, you weren't there. Yes, we were there. But so Nick Coit is the sports director there. He was a couple years ahead of me in college, but I knew who he was. Super talented back then and still is now. And, you know, he brought me in and showed me the ropes at Channel 6, and I will forever be grateful for him for bringing me back home. You know, he took a step up. Ken Bell, who was there for almost 40 years, retired, and Nick was taking over for Ken and looking for number 2, and I was lucky enough to get that job and come back home. And I've been there, what's it been now? Probably like 4 years, going on 4 years now. And it's been great. You know, you come back in, you're covering the teams you grew up watching, you're seeing it up close.
Ask that, like, I assume you were a Boston sports fan growing up. Now you're actually getting the opportunity to cover it. I mean, that's amazing. It's like a dream come true almost.
It is. It really is. It's what I wanted to do when I started out, you know, trying to do this for a profession. You know, the goal was to always come back to New England and cover these teams that, you know, I grew up following so closely, and that brought so much to me and to my family, and so many good times, and heartbreak as well. Let's not forget, but you just get so invested in it and you remember it forever. And yeah, it's a dream job. It really is a dream job. It's a dream come true. Like you said, it really is. And it's not lost on me at any point. And that's part of the other reason why, you know, there are times where you're exhausted and you're burnt out, but like I think back to 2018 when we covered the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, the Red Sox winning the World Series, the Bruins going to the Stanley Cup, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, like the longest year ever. We were exhausted by the end of that. But you take a step back and you think about it and you're like, how amazing was that we just witnessed all of this stuff up close. We were able to share it with our viewers and the people that follow us. That's what it's all about. And it's about, telling the stories that you grew up listening to, like the reasons why there are so many fans out there, is because of the stories that guys like us told before us and that we get to do now. Guys and girls that told the stories before us that we get to do now. It's great. It is a dream job. And I think about it all the time, especially when you need like a kick in the ass, a little bit of motivation. Like, remember how lucky you are. And I certainly do.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you're probably really fortunate to have landed a job back in New England. A lot of people are bouncing around until they can come back home and reach their end goal of working in a specific city or their hometown or something like that. So that's amazing, that you were able to kind of come back and now, again, like you mentioned, just cover the teams that you grew up watching as a fan. I mean, for me personally, if I had the opportunity to do that at some point, I definitely would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. And it's true. It is not lost on me one bit how fortunate I am and how lucky I am. And the reason all for it is Nick. I mean, he had so many valid applicants, and like you said, it's a competitive business. It really is. Like, it's a highly sought after position. It's not one that I or he takes lightly. And I appreciate it every single day that I get to go to work, because it is just such a dream for someone like me, someone who grew up in our area, to get a chance to do. It's not lost on me at all. So yeah, I am one of the lucky ones for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, two-part question. So, your favorite part of the job, and then probably the most challenging thing about the job. You mentioned running back and forth from game to game and having to edit clips and put together a whether it's 30 seconds, 15 seconds, anything like that, to be on the show at night. Running around back and forth. What would you say is probably your favorite thing about it, which you kind of touched upon earlier, and then the most challenging part of the job?
My favorite thing about this is, one, just getting a ticket to history, and getting to share that with people that watch us on Channel 6. Like, that's, clearly the best part. I've been to 2 Super Bowls, World Series games, Stanley Cups, NBA playoffs. The Celtics got to get it together. March Madness, like A-10 championships, Big East tournaments, hockey national championships, and that is the best part. Getting to watch these unbelievable athletes, unbelievable coaches do their thing on the highest level, is the best part. That combined with seeing our local athletes and coaches and do amazing things as well. Like what some of these schools and some of these kids are going through during COVID, and finding ways to just put together their high school years with some sort of joy, trying to find something to bring them happiness. And a lot of that comes through athletics. Like think about, how packed, like I said, those baseball games were in Texas, and, how the state championship games and the playoff games in Rhode Island have been so fun and so enjoyable, and the Super Bowl games at Cranston Stadium. And to think that, a lot of these kids for like 2 years haven't been able to experience something like that. It's heartbreaking, it's tough. I understand, the reasons why. No one wants to protect themselves and the community more from COVID than I do. But at the same time, it just stinks. I don't think that's a controversial statement. It stinks that this is happening right now. Hopefully soon enough, this thing will be gone and everyone can get back to normal and experience their lives, because those are some of my favorite, my favorite part of the job is just seeing the success stories that come out of this and the inspirational stories that come out of this, whether it's, whether it's, Tom Brady pulling out the greatest comeback of all time, knowing his mom's sick in the back of his head. And this past year, Brady, and I didn't cover this up close, but, Brady's dad getting COVID, and he's still focusing and still gets to the top of the promised land. And what a moment it must have been for them to celebrate that Super Bowl after the Bucs won. Or even this past year we did the soccer championships, and Gianna Sorella's sister scored the game-winning goal, and Gianna passed away, and she was able to, channel that. And it was such an inspirational story. We talked to her and her mom, and it just, that sort of inspiration. Those are the stories we love to tell. That's my favorite part of the job, is the storytelling aspect of history. You get to take in what just happened and then share it with your viewers. That's my favorite part of this job. The most challenging part of the job, that's a good question. Probably the sacrifice. I've worked weekends my entire career. It's not a long career yet by any means, but I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I've been working weekends. That's a lot of time with friends and family that, goes by and you don't get back. But it's, sacrifice one thing to gain another. And I think I've been doing a decent job at it so far. But that's probably the biggest thing is, the sacrifice of time. It takes a lot of time. The hours are long. They can be strenuous. They are, they're tough sometimes. A lot of holidays, a lot of weekends, not a lot of vacation time. Sometimes you don't know what your schedule is going to be from day to day, week to week. If this team wins, then you're staying here. If this team loses, then you're going over here and you're doing this and that. It changes on a day-to-day basis. The hecticity is a part of it. It's part of why we like it. It's, it beats being a plumber, beats sitting in a cubicle and pushing numbers all day. That's for sure. But the challenging thing is the sacrifice of time. You know what I mean? I've had to work Christmases, I've had to work Thanksgivings, long weekends, 4th of July's, away from home, in Rhode Island, but not able to come up to Massachusetts to see my family. So that's probably the toughest part. I will say though, at Channel 6, it's been great because Nick and I have such a good working dynamic. We understand that, sometimes family comes first, and there are times where we need to be with our family, or we work out the holidays in a way that works for both of us. Nick has been so great at, just keeping that in perspective. And that's something that you have to do at all times, just keeping that in perspective, what's important. So Channel 6 and Nick have been great to me in that respect, but at the same time, it's not all the time. Sometimes you gotta work. Sorry, gotta go to work. I remember Nick covered, I think it was a Mother's Day Celtics playoff game, and he tweeted out a picture from TD Garden. He said, gave Mom her present, gave her a kiss on the cheek, and said, sorry, Ma, I gotta go to work. And he drove up to Boston to cover the game, and I went into the studio to cover the game from there. So that's the type of stuff that, that you have to go through, but at the same time, it's, you leave that to go do something you love. And that's definitely a part of it.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's, it's your passion. It's what you do. It's, your job, but, also being able to kind of distinguish that fine line of, your family and your life outside of work and outside of sports. And then what you have to do in the studio or at the games. So it's definitely, again, something that I'm considering as a job, but, taking all these different things into consideration, I think it definitely impacts a lot of people's decision whether or not they want to continue to pursue something. But I think it's amazing that, you really stand by something, you're committed to it. And I mean, I'd say you've been pretty successful so far. So that's great.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Still grinding every day, but at the same time, that is that's a great thing that you point out. It's definitely something that everyone who thinks about going into this business should consider, because it takes a village to kind of piece together everything else around someone that's in our shoes, and it affects a lot of personal decisions and life decisions that people make, whether it's I've been fortunate enough to have the same position for 4 years, but a lot of times in this business, like you mentioned, there's 2 years here, and then you move up a little bit to 2 years here, and then 2 years there and there and there, and you're bouncing around a lot. And that's something that affects a lot of things too, marriage, kids, family, things like that. We're buying a house, just living off rent in apartments forever. Big life things like that definitely come into consideration, more so probably down the road for you, after college and after you establish a career a little bit and things like that. But it's something to consider down the road while you're in college, thinking about like, okay, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? Keyword, for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? I don't regret it one bit. And I don't think anyone who actually gets in here does. But there are some examples of people who, come into this business, try it out for a little bit and realize, something a little bit more stable schedule-wise and moving around-wise and life-wise is better for them. And that's their choice. And I completely understand where they come from. But at the same time, I love this too much to ever think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I have 2 more questions. So the first one is, you touched upon going to all these, World Series games, Stanley Cups, NBA Finals, Super Bowls, also being able to do high school sports, stuff like that. But throughout your career, what would you say was the most memorable thing or your favorite memory that you've covered, or a game that you've covered, or just something, a story that you could share from the studio, anything like that?
That's a great question. One. Well, I guess I'll say the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, being in the stadium in Atlanta for Super Bowl 53 when they beat the Rams. We were up on the stadium, and we were working our way down to the locker room to go do interviews afterwards. But Nick turns and looks at me and he goes, "You want to go to the field and just watch the last couple of seconds?" And it's funny, as we're walking down to get set up for post-game interviews, who do we walk past but the Kraft family? We're getting escorted onto the field to get the Lombardi trophy and all that. And Nick and I look, we see Robert and Jonathan Kraft walking this way, we're walking that way. And they're getting closer, and I just see Jonathan Kraft's face. He is so fired up. He's like fist bumping. He's like, "Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby." And usually, when with interviews with Mr. Kraft and Jonathan Kraft, they're very put together, they're very composed, they're the owners of the football team. But just to see, they're human too. They're celebrating just like everybody at home is celebrating. So I remember walking out and seeing the Kraft family, and I've never seen Jonathan Kraft more fired up, obviously, than winning a Super Bowl, because that's the ultimate goal for this team. But just like they say, you remember your first, and that was the first championship that I saw, professional sports championship that I saw in person. And so, Nick was there in LA to see the Red Sox win the World Series and see that trophy given out. But I was back in Rhode Island for that one. So I saw the Lombardi trophy handed out, and the confetti fall and said Patriots champions at the top. And It just reminded me of like watching in this exact room. Actually, I'm at my mom's house in Marshfield right now on a digger of snow after all this falls. And I was sitting in this room when Brady won his first one, actually. It's kind of funny. I didn't even realize that till right now, but I was sitting in this room. And then when Vinatieri kicked the field goal through, I ran through that door and I ran out to my parents. And, and that's what you do when you're from New England, So to see that from my couch here in Marshfield and then to see that in person in Atlanta, I said it felt like I was Tom Brady all over again with my hands on my head watching the confetti fall, like that clip from the Super Bowl highlights. That's kind of what it felt like. You give up some of the fandom in order to, maintain, integrity and be able to question, when questions need to be asked and all that stuff. But at the same time, you grow up around here, you understand what it means. And I'd say that's my favorite. And like I said, there were 100 of those inspiring local stories that I love just as much as well. But that one struck home for me because, I was that kid watching at home one time, and then you're a teensy part of it.
Sure. That's really cool. You brought up that, being able to see some of these owners and coaches like really bring out the real true them, honestly, when they're not on the field and they have to be professional. But have you had the opportunity to make Bill Belichick smile yet, or
make him smile? No, I made a lot of people smile with Bill Belichick though, because after the first game this past year, I asked him what it was like to play in the stadium with no fans, and he said, so I asked him, I said, can you compare playing a game in a stadium with no fans to anything you've been through in your career? And he gave me practice. That was me. Then they put that on Football Night in America and all that stuff. So yes, that was me. I laughed along with him. It was funny. So I've been on the side of Bill Belichick one-liner for sure. But I'm sure, make him smile. That's a tough task.
Yeah.
But I will say this, Bill Belichick gets the rep of, being very, standoffish and short in press conferences and in the media. For example, that one-word answer that he gave me. But at the same time, I've also gotten great answers out of him. When you talk football with Bill Belichick, he'll talk football with you all day. It's some of the extracurriculars and the flair around it that he really doesn't have that much time.
Got it. Yeah. All right. So the final question I have is what advice would you give to students like myself or just other sports media people, students, or just anyone looking to get into the industry, do what you kind of do, and have the same experiences that you had throughout your career?
There's a lot. But one, I would say work hard wherever you're at right now. If you're, like you said, doing a podcast and doing the radio broadcast and all that, work your butt off in the things that you do. And if you're not yet, find a way to get your foot in the door. And no job is too big or too small, if you're an intern, whether it's, an intern who runs around and makes copies and gets coffees, or if it's an intern that gets a camera in their hand and gets to go in front of the camera and all that stuff. Every opportunity you get, make sure that you put the most into that as much as you can. That's really the first thing. Is there's no substitute for hard work, and it will pay off. It always pays off. That's like the golden rule. That's the one thing that has always kind of shown for me. Everyone I've seen have success in this business works their tail off, and they do not stop, because it doesn't stop. So that's what I would say. And for students like yourself Apply for internships. Email the people in your market or who you may want to work with or work for internship opportunities. It's never too early to at least get an email out and start a dialogue, just like you did with me. You did that correctly. Even if, I know some, stations or radio stations, TV stations don't accept interns until you have X amount of credits or you're a junior or a senior. But still, I remember Nick Coit and Stone Freeman tell the story about how Stone tweeted at him, how can I get an internship or something with at Nick Coit? This guy has the dream job. And then one random day, I think they were in Foxborough at the same time, and Stone saw that Nick was in Foxborough and then tweeted at him, and then they met up. And this was years before he was an intern with us. And now he's going to grad school there, and he's doing all the play-by-play and everything that he does. So that's a great example of, it's never too early to just reach out and start building connections and building contacts. That never stops. And last thing is just don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially when you're young, especially when you're in college or you're at your first job. As long as your bosses are okay with it, take some risks and don't get fired, but take some risks and you'll land on your feet. And if you don't, pick yourself back up and try again the next day, because that's the big thing. There's always the next day. There's always the next broadcast. In the news, there's going to be news tomorrow. You can't dwell on something you may have messed up the night before or today, because tomorrow there's going to be another one, and you're going to be right back out there doing the same thing that you did today. So don't dwell on the mistakes too bad, because everybody makes them, whether you're a vet or you're new.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, taking the time to talk with me and those listening or viewing, because this is the world of Zoom now and viewing. Yeah. But thank you again for taking the time and talking to me. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Adam. Reach out anytime. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.